Welcome to the Understanding of the Public Sector video series. This video is aimed at providing viewers with an introduction to the legislation governing the public sector in South Africa. It also aims to provide the viewer with a basic understanding of the structure of government and is used as an introduction to the broader topics that form part of the series of videos, in which we will be introducing viewers to the key legislative requirements governing public sector finances, the applicable financial reporting frameworks and auditing requirements, the functions and objectives of the various spheres of government, an introduction to performance information, procurement principles, and an introduction and overview of key topics such as unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This introductory video will cover the following topics, namely the Constitution, Public Finance Management Act, related Treasury regulations, and the Municipal Finance Management Act. The Constitution. This is the founding legislation for South Africa and forms the basis for the principles of our democracy, as well as our legislation in South Africa. It is our supreme law. Our Constitution was adopted in 1996. The Constitution introduces the South African Parliament and indicates how it is formed, its composition, as well as the powers our Parliament has. The objectives of the Constitution are also introduced, and it is meant to heal the divisions of the past, lay the foundations for a democratic and open society, and to improve the quality of life of all citizens. The Constitution forms the basis for other legislation that will be discussed in this overview. It is important to note that our Constitution outlines a basic principle that states that any other legislation or conduct which is inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid. The Constitution also introduces the three different spheres of government, being the national, provincial, and local spheres. The national sphere of government includes all national departments such as the National Department of Health or the National Department of Basic Education. Each department has its own minister, and the collective of these ministers is known as our cabinet, which is determined by the president. Also included in the national sphere of government is our parliament and other national public entities. Commonly known national public entities are Eskom, Transnet, South African Airways, and South African Revenue Services. Within this sphere, we also have constitutional institutions established by Chapter 9 of the Constitution, and it is for this reason you often hear of so-called Chapter 9 institutions. Examples of these institutions are the Auditor General of South Africa and the South African Human Rights Commission. The provincial sphere of government includes each province's departments, known as provincial departments. Examples of this is each province having their own provincial Department of Health and Education. This sphere also has public entities known as provincial public entities, and examples of this are the respective provincial gambling boards and the Sharks Board. Each province also has its own provincial legislature, and each province has an individual known as the Premier of the province. The local sphere of government consists of all the municipalities in South Africa, as well as municipal entities. There are 278 municipalities in South Africa, comprising 8 metropolitan, 44 districts, and 226 local municipalities. Examples of major metropolitan municipalities are the City of Joburg and the eThekwini municipality. Municipal entities are established by municipalities to fulfill specific functions delegated to them by the municipality. An example of a municipal entity is City Power, which is owned by the City of Joburg. The Public Finance Management Act, known as PFMA. This legislation arises from Section 216 of the Constitution and governs public finances on the national and provincial sphere of government. The objective of this act is to secure transparency, accountability, and sound management of the revenue, expenditure, assets, and liabilities of the institutions to which this act applies. The PFMA was adopted in 1999 and introduces key concepts that we hear in everyday media, such as irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and unauthorized expenditure. It also establishes our national treasury and indicates the mandate and powers of our national treasury. This act also introduces the concept of governance within the public sector and provides responsibility to different individuals or boards that are ultimately responsible for the implementation of this act. The PFMA also gives rise to its own set of regulations known as the Treasury Regulations, which is an extension of the PFMA and provides more detail to various aspects of the PFMA. The Treasury Regulations. As indicated, this is an extension of the PFMA and provides detailed application of the PFMA and has different chapters applicable to different aspects of government. For example, certain chapters of the Treasury Regulations are only applicable to departments and certain chapters are only applicable to public entities. The Municipal Finance Management Act, known as the MFMA. This legislation, like the PFMA, arises from Section 216 of the Constitution and governs public finances in the third sphere of government, referred to as local government. The objectives of this act are similar to that of the PFMA, but for local government. The MFMA was adopted in 2003 and introduces similar concepts as we have already mentioned in the PFMA. Please view the other videos in this series to gain a better understanding of how the public sector operates. In our next video, we will be discussing the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa.